It happened on one of those mornings when I felt almost invisible, rushing into the tall glass lobby of my new job, clutching my bag, trying not to spill my coffee, and wishing I could just blend into the sea of polished people around me. Everyone seemed so sure of themselves, crisp suits, expensive watches, the quiet arrogance of belonging. And then there was me, on my third week at the firm, still fumbling with my ID badge, still rehearsing people's names in my head like a school kid before roll call. That's when I noticed him. He was standing a little to the side near the reception desk. Older, perhaps in his late 60s, with a wool scarf draped carefully around his neck despite the mild weather. At first, I thought he was just waiting for someone. But then I saw the way he was looking around, eyes alert but not connecting. A receptionist tried to say something to him, but he tilted his head, puzzled. She repeated, louder this time, which only seemed to make him flinch. It clicked slowly in my mind. The way his lips moved, the gestures of his hands. It wasn't confusion. He was deaf. And no one seemed to know what to do with that. People walked past him, annoyed, like he was an obstruction in their path. The receptionist gave up and turned back to her computer. He stood there, stranded in a sea of hurry, clutching a small folded paper in his hand. I don't know why, but my feet moved before I had time to think. I approached him carefully, tapped my chest with a smile, then pointed gently to the paper he was holding. His face lit up with relief as he unfolded it. Written in neat block letters, "Here to meet Mr. R, 10 a.m. I nodded, mouthed okay, and motioned for him to follow me. We weren't exactly trained for this kind of thing, but kindness doesn't need a manual. So I guided him, step by step, through the maze of security desks and elevators, pointing, smiling, gesturing as best as I could. I didn't know that up on the mezzanine balcony, someone else was watching, someone whose opinion in this building carried far more weight than I could ever imagine. Sometimes the smallest kindness is seen when you least expect it. I didn't think much of it once I'd guided the man to the right floor. He squeezed my hand in thanks before disappearing through a frosted glass door, and I hurried back toward my desk, worried I'd be late logging into my computer. In the whirlwind of emails and spreadsheets, the whole episode started to fade from my mind, just a passing human moment before the grind took over. But the lobby stayed with me. The hush of marble floors, the way people had turned away from him, the scarf he wore, thick and patterned with quiet dignity. It wasn't flashy, just warm, almost handmade looking. It struck me that someone must have given it to him with care, maybe a daughter or a wife who wanted him to feel both protected and seen. That scarf felt like a clue to a story I didn't yet know. By lunchtime, I'd forgotten all about it. I carried my sandwich downstairs, looking for a bench outside, and found one tucked beneath the tall columns by the main entrance. I unwrapped my meal, grateful for a moment alone, when I noticed her. She wasn't dressed like the executives or the staff. Her clothes were elegant but understated. A cream coat, a simple string of pearls, and eyes that studied the world like they already knew all its secrets. She sat on the far end of the bench, a small book closed in her lap. When I smiled politely, she returned it, but there was something curious in the way she kept glancing at me. After a moment, she spoke, not loudly, just enough for me to hear above the city hum. "You're the one who helped him this morning, aren't you?" I froze, halfway through unwrapping my sandwich. My mind scrambled. Helped who? Then it clicked, the man in the lobby. My pulse quickened. How could she know? I just showed him where to go, I stammered. She tilted her head, as though weighing my words. Most people didn't. Her voice wasn't accusing. If anything, it was thoughtful, almost kind. But there was a gravity in it too, a weight I couldn't place. Something told me this was no ordinary passerby. And I was right, because by the end of that week I would learn her name and realize she wasn't just watching. She was testing. Sometimes, what feels like a small act of kindness is the beginning of a far larger test. The next morning, as I settled at my desk with my coffee, an email arrived that made my stomach drop. It was from HR, not the usual reminders or forms, but a direct summons. Please report to conference room 7B at 11 a.m. regarding a matter of conduct. Conduct?
My mean spoon.
Had I done something wrong? I replayed the last week, arriving late once, fumbling with a copier, accidentally sending an email to reply all. But conduct sounded serious, formal. I spent the next 2 hours half working, half dreading. At exactly 11, I walked to 7B. The room was smaller than I expected, lined with sleek chairs and a long table. And sitting there wasn't HR at all. It was her, the woman from the bench. The one who had spoken so quietly, so deliberately. She greeted me with a calm smile, gesturing for me to sit. I apologize for the cryptic invitation, she said, but I thought it better to keep this private. I sat cautiously, clutching my notebook like a shield. May I ask who you are? She folded her hands. My name is Eleanor. I'm married to Richard, the CEO of this company. My breath caught. The CEO's wife. Suddenly, the elegant coat, the measured way she carried herself, it all made sense. I felt a flush of embarrassment rise in my cheeks. I saw you yesterday in the lobby, she continued. You didn't hesitate to help the man others ignored. That man is family. Her eyes softened, but her tone grew firmer. What you did was kind. But kindness, to be true, must be steady, especially under pressure. That is what I wanted to see. I frowned, unsure where this was going. You mean you were testing me? In a way, yes. She leaned forward slightly. Richard believes character reveals itself not in boardrooms, but in lobbies, elevators, and small courtesies. You pass the first part without knowing. But now, I would like to extend an invitation to something of a challenge. She slid a folded card across the table. Inside was an address and a time. Saturday, 3 p.m. No explanation, no details. Come as you are, Eleanor said, rising from her chair. No need to prepare. Just bring the same heart you carried yesterday. And with that, she left me in the silent room, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air, the card burning like a secret in my hand. I didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of a series of tests, each one designed to measure something deeper than skill. And all I could think was, would I still pass when I knew I was being watched? True tests of character rarely come announced. Saturday arrived with an overcast sky, the kind that makes you feel like the day itself is holding its breath. I stood outside the address on the card, a townhouse tucked on a quiet street, its brick walls ivy-clad, its windows tall and curtained. It didn't look like a corporate place at all. More like a home layered with stories. I rang the bell, heart hammering. After a pause, the door opened to reveal Eleanor, dressed simply in a cardigan and slacks. She greeted me with a warmth that felt almost disarming. Thank you for coming, she said. Come in. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and old books. In the living room, I noticed the scarf immediately, his scarf, folded neatly over the arm of a chair. The man from the lobby wasn't there, but the object itself was like a quiet witness, reminding me of how this had all begun. Eleanor motioned toward a small table where a teapot and cups were set out. Before we begin, let me explain. Richard and I believe that positions of responsibility, whether in family or in business, must be entrusted to people of character, not just talent. But character cannot be measured on a resume. It must be seen. That's why you're here. I nodded, though my throat felt dry. So, what exactly is this? She smiled slightly. Think of it as a series of puzzles, each simple on the surface, but revealing underneath. Today is the first. She gestured to the table. Beside the teapot sat 3 plates, one with a neatly wrapped sandwich, one with a slice of cake, and one with only a half-eaten biscuit, crumbs scattered around it. I would like you to choose one, she said. I blinked, confused. Choose one to eat. To claim, she clarified. Don't overthink. Just choose. I looked at the plates. The sandwich seemed practical, nourishing. The cake was tempting, indulgent. The half biscuit looked like leftovers, something no one else wanted. I hesitated, sensing there was no obvious right answer. My mind ran circles. Was this about humility? Gratitude? Assertiveness? Finally, I pointed to the sandwich. Eleanor's eyes flickered, but she didn't comment. She simply nodded and poured tea into both our cups. "Every choice speaks," she murmured. "We'll see what yours says in time." We sat in silence for a moment, sipping the steaming tea. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just stepped onto a chessboard, and every move from here on out would be watched, weighed, and remembered. Sometimes the smallest choices echo the loudest. The following week passed in a blur of ordinary office routines, but beneath it all, I carried the weight of that strange afternoon. The sandwich, the silence, the way Eleanor's eyes had lingered, not judging, but storing something away. By Friday, another card appeared on my desk. No envelope this time, just placed neatly by my keyboard. Tomorrow. Same place. 4 p.m. When I arrived, Eleanor greeted me in the foyer and led me to a different room, a small study lined with photographs. Family portraits in silver frames, children at various ages, a younger Richard with a stern jawline. But one picture made me stop. The man from the lobby, younger by a decade, standing with Eleanor at some family gathering. His scarf, unmistakable even then, draped over his shoulders. "You recognize him," Eleanor said softly, following my gaze. I nodded. "From the lobby." He seemed lost. "He isn't just anyone," she said, placing the frame back on the shelf. "That's Richard's older brother. Deaf since childhood. Brilliant mind, but treated for years as if his silence made him lesser. Many in this family, many in this company, still don't know how to see him." Her voice wavered for the first time, carrying a private ache. "He comes to the building sometimes just to feel included. Most ignore him. Some treat him as a nuisance. That's why your kindness mattered. You didn't know who he was. You simply saw a man who needed help." The revelation sank into me, heavier than I expected. Martin wasn't just a passerby, he was part of the very family that built this empire. My simple choice in the lobby suddenly seemed enormous. Eleanor studied me, her gaze unwavering. "Richard has asked me to observe, not your competence, not your ambition, but your heart. Because sooner or later, heart determines everything." I swallowed hard. "And the tests?" She gave a faint smile. "They are less about passing or failing, more about revealing. But understand this. Every choice reflects not just on you, but on the trust Richard may or may not place in you." I realized then, this wasn't just a game. It was a doorway into something far larger than my job. My actions, however small, were being weighed on a scale I hadn't known existed. And the scarf on the chair, folded so carefully, seemed to whisper, "Choose wisely. Always choose wisely." Sometimes the truth of who someone is isn't hidden, it's waiting to see if you'll notice. From that day forward, the air around me at work seemed to change. Colleagues who once barely noticed me began watching more closely, though I wasn't sure if it was my imagination. Small things, someone lingering by my desk, a manager nodding faintly when I spoke in a meeting, felt charged with invisible meaning. I kept wondering, is this another test? Or am I just becoming paranoid? The next Saturday, Eleanor summoned me again. This time, she led me into the kitchen, where a simple scene was laid out. On the counter sat 3 sealed envelopes, identical except for the colored wax seals, red, blue, and green. Each envelope, she explained, contains a task. You may choose only one. You will not know what the others hold, and you may not change your mind. My pulse quickened. I stared at the colors as though they might whisper their secrets. Red seemed urgent, dangerous even. Blue felt safe, calm. Green was somewhere in between. Life, growth, uncertainty. My mind spun in circles. Finally, I reached for the green. Eleanor's eyes glimmered with something like approval, though she said nothing. She simply handed it to me and gestured for me to open it. Inside was a slip of paper with a handwritten instruction. Invite Martin to lunch this week. Choose the place. Sit with him. Listen. The words looked simple, but they made my stomach flip. Lunch with the CEO's brother? Me? Eleanor must have seen my hesitation. You helped him once in passing. Now help him in presence. Most people avoid conversation with Martin, as if silence makes them uncomfortable. But kindness isn't comfort, it's courage. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. That Monday, I found Martin again in the lobby, scarf looped neatly around his neck. My heart pounded as I approached. With clumsy hand gestures and slow words, I invited him to lunch. His eyes widened, then softened with something like relief. He nodded. We met 2 days later at a quiet cafe nearby. I'd chosen it because it wasn't loud, hoping he could feel at ease. We didn't speak much, not in words. He pointed to things on the menu, smiled when the food arrived, and occasionally tapped the table to get my attention. I listened with my eyes, my gestures, my patience. And for the first time, I realized how much can be said without speaking. When we parted, he patted my hand, then pointed at my sandwich, the same kind I had chosen at Eleanor's house, and gave me a thumbs up as though he remembered too. But that wasn't the end of it. Because when I returned to the office, I found Richard, the CEO himself, standing in the lobby with Eleanor at his side, watching me walk back in. And I knew then the tests were only getting harder. The more you prove your heart, the more life asks of it. Richard called me into his office the very next morning. I'd never been inside before, and the room itself felt like a fortress, dark wood paneling, a massive desk, and walls lined with oil paintings of stoic ancestors I couldn't name. He stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, while Eleanor sat quietly in the corner, her eyes fixed on me with that same unreadable calm. "I hear you had lunch with my brother," Richard said without turning. His voice was deep, deliberate, the kind that weighed every syllable. "Yes, sir," I answered, trying to steady my voice. "We've shared a meal." At last he turned, his expression hard to read. Most people in this building avoid him. They don't mean harm, they just don't see the point. He has no say in company affairs, no influence, no voice. He paused, leaning slightly on the desk. "So, why did you?" I swallowed. The truth felt too simple, but it was all I had. Because he's a person. He looked like he wanted company. And I wanted to listen. For a long moment, the room was silent. Then Richard gave a short, sharp laugh, not unkind, but not warm either. "Naive," he muttered, "but perhaps necessary." He sat down, folding his hands. "Let's see how steady your kindness truly is. Tomorrow night, we're hosting a formal dinner. Investors, partners, family. Martin will be there. Sit with him. Stay by him. But be warned, some will question it. Some will even mock you, though not to your face. They'll wonder why you waste your seat on a man who cannot advance your career." Eleanor's voice broke in gently. "It's not about the dinner. It's about whether you'll hold your ground when the whispers grow." My chest tightened. I imagined the glittering hall, the sharp eyes, the weight of silence between clinking glasses. Helping in the lobby was one thing. Lunch in a cafe, another. But sitting with Martin at the CEO's table, in front of everyone who mattered, that would mark me. Richard leaned forward, eyes piercing. "This is not about pleasing Eleanor or me. It's about revealing yourself. Will you take this seat?" I hesitated only a moment. Then I nodded. "Yes, sir. I will." He studied me, then gave the faintest of nods. "We shall see." And just like that, the dinner became my battlefield, not of words, but of presence. True courage isn't in grand gestures, but in standing firm when the world whispers against you. The dinner was held in the grand ballroom of a downtown hotel, the kind of place where chandeliers glitter like frozen stars and the sound of polished silverware rings sharper than any bell. I walked in feeling impossibly small in my modest suit, but determined. I found Martin near the edge of the crowd, scarf draped neatly over his shoulders as always. His eyes lit up when he saw me, and that was all the reassurance I needed. When the seating began, I kept my promise. I took the chair beside him at one of the long tables, even though I noticed a few raised brows among the guests. Some of them nodded politely, but I caught the whispers, muted chuckles, a smirk or two, someone murmuring, "Waste of a seat." I forced myself to breathe through it, keeping my focus on Martin. I showed him the courses on the menu, letting him point to what he wanted. We shared small gestures, smiles, even laughter when the waiter misunderstood and brought 2 soups instead of 1. The noise of the room buzzed around us, but somehow it felt like we had carved out a quiet, dignified corner just for ourselves. Halfway through the evening, Richard rose to make a toast. His presence silenced the room instantly. He raised his glass, eyes sweeping over the guests, and then, unexpectedly, he stopped at our table. "My brother Martin," he said, voice steady. "Many of you overlook him. Some of you have never even spoken to him. But tonight I want you to see what I see.
Strength, dignity,
and the quiet power of being fully human." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Then, turning slightly, he added, "And I want you to see the one person in this room who chose, without being told, to honor that. To sit with him, not as an obligation, but as a choice. That is the kind of character I value above all else." The entire room turned toward me. My face burned, but I held Martin's gaze. He gave me a small nod, a silent thank you that spoke louder than the applause beginning to ripple through the hall. Richard lifted his glass higher. "To kindness that asks nothing in return, and to those who still remember it." The toast echoed, crystal chiming like bells, and in that moment, I realized what this had all been about. Not a test for a promotion. Not even a test for trust. It was a test of whether I could see what truly mattered when status and appearances tried to blind me. From that night onward, people looked at me differently. Not because I was clever, not because I was ambitious, but because I had chosen to see a man others ignored. And the scarf, folded over Martin's chair, seemed to glow with a quiet legacy that dignity is not given by titles, but by how we treat each other. The worth of a life is measured not in what we gain, but in whom we choose to see. In the weeks that followed, my life didn't transform overnight. There were no sudden promotions, no confetti falling from the ceiling. The office still had its deadlines, my desk still gathered coffee rings, and I still fumbled names now and then. But something had shifted. People who once overlooked me began to nod as I passed. Managers listened more closely when I spoke in meetings. Even small gestures, like colleagues asking if I wanted to join them for lunch, carried a new weight. It wasn't respect born of fear or status. It was quieter, steadier, the kind of respect that grows when others sense your compass point's true north. As for Martin, we made lunch a regular thing. Sometimes we ate sandwiches in the park, sometimes just shared coffee. We didn't need many words. Our silences were full. And every time I saw that scarf, draped over his shoulders or folded neatly beside him, it reminded me how one small act in a lobby had rippled outward into everything that came after. Eleanor would still smile knowingly when our paths crossed. Richard, true to his nature, never said much. But once, in the elevator, he looked at me and murmured, "You've done well. Not for me, for yourself." And then he was gone before I could answer. Life has a way of surprising us with tests we don't know we're taking. Sometimes they look like envelopes with wax seals. Sometimes they look like family dinners. And sometimes they look like a man standing alone in a lobby, clutching a folded piece of paper, waiting for anyone, to see him. If I've learned anything, it's this: greatness doesn't always announce itself with grand gestures. More often, it whispers through the way we treat the overlooked, the way we choose the half-broken biscuit, the way we sit in silence, so another soul doesn't feel alone. And maybe that's worth remembering in our own lives. Tomorrow, when you pass someone who seems invisible, or when you're faced with the choice between convenience and compassion, pause. Look again. Extend a hand. Because you never know who might be watching, and more importantly, who might be needing you in that very moment. Kindness is never wasted. It is the one investment that always multiplies.